how we did that was to get a number of department members to become subject matter experts in this law and work on developing our own department policy based on the regional model policy that had been developed. Once we had that policy developed, we then created a series of trainings that we had everybody in the department go through. Part of that training, and I think one of the critical parts of this, was scenario-based training, where we had different stories basically written out that would walk officers through these the different ways that these incidents could go, and then have a conversation about what would you do, how was that based on the training. These scenarios, then we can go back during roll call training and do them on a fairly regular basis so that we can kind of embed that new way of approaching these situations. One of the things that we're really working with the training academy is how do we get this new way of doing things trained with our new officers so that they start their career with this idea of harm reduction. Really important aspect to this is similarity in actions of other police departments, because one thing that we found is we've done a number of ERPOs that have cross-jurisdictional lines. You have somebody living in one city and working in another, or you have somebody that's living in a city and going to school in another. You have to work closely with your fellow law enforcement agencies in managing this extreme risk protection order. And if you're operating off of the same sheet of music, it makes things a lot easier. That's where, as much as you can share the training scenarios so that officers being trained in a similar way, getting that training into the basic academy so officers have that baseline familiarity, no matter what agency they're working for, is really, really important. Extreme risk protection orders don't have to stand on their own. In fact, they really rarely do. You're getting called to potential suicide, or you've been called to a domestic violence where there's clearly a behavioral health crisis going on with one of the individuals. So it's not just training on ERPOs, it's integrating ERPOs into those pretty common calls that law enforcement has. So one of the thoughts that we've had is, how do we weave ERPO into ongoing training? For example, in Washington State, we have a requirement that we have a certain number of hours of crisis intervention training each year. So we're working with the academy to say, can we have extreme risk protection orders woven into that crisis intervention training? In a similar way, we need to do the same thing with domestic violence calls. So if you see somebody with that behavioral health crisis in that family domestic violence situation, are we training officers to provide that information to the families to let them know that there is this other tool? Another aspect about it is, are we providing, in a similar way to domestic violence advocates, are we providing advocacy to families that have maybe a family member that is suffering from a behavioral health crisis that may benefit from an ERPO? So those are things that we're at the front line figuring out how to do, but I think it's important not to look at it as a standalone situation.